Welcome. I'm Lady Creepypasta. Most of us have heard of the Tooth Fairy, but do you know her origins? In today's tale, Redditor Earntold gives us a bit of a unique history lesson with interesting lesson aids. So come, lean in closer, and let's begin. A lot of us will have, I'm sure, grown up with a good understanding of the myth of the Tooth Fairy. The often female figure will look under a child's pillow, find a lost baby tooth, and exchange it for money or another type of gift. Being as interested in mythological creatures as I was during my early academic years, I looked into and began documenting the variations of this myth around the world. And really, it is quite fascinating. In the majority of English-speaking parts of the world, we have that image of a miniature winged woman. They take the tooth and leave a coin. Perhaps you're picturing it now. A dark room, curtains slightly open to help the fairy see and sense the tooth. The twinkling, glittering creature pushing a golden coin under the child's pillow as fair exchange for the offering. At which point they hover away, tooth in hand or a pouch they carry, and flutter back to their own realm. Meanwhile, if you look at parts of Europe, particularly the Mediterranean, you'll see far more birds and rodents taking that job. In Italy, you'll hear of Topolino, the little mouse, or in Spain, El Raton Perez. Now, over the course of these studies, I had stumbled upon notions of a fairy rat in regions of Scotland, but despite countless interviews and surveys I've since run across the UK, it seems that today no one has had any memory of that being the tale their parents told them. The fact that one country's own myth could be effectively killed off by another that is far more prominent in the modern day and have no trace of it in historical texts is a large part of why I made it a significant focus in my academic career. The notion behind these tales, where a rodent is the key figure exchanging the teeth, is that the child makes a wish that they will leave their old tooth and request that their new growing tooth shall be strong and sharp like a mouse's, or, if a crow or raven is to take it, that they will help the child grow an iron one instead. Now, if you're a curious sort, almost certainly you've wondered, what the heck do they need all those teeth for anyway? I looked around at my students. They'd been silent for the lecture so far. It was a Monday morning, a good chance they'd be hungover. Perhaps throwing out a question would get a reaction. And it's a good question if the prevailing myth is that they take our old teeth and promise to leave money or ensure a stronger, newer, bigger tooth, then what exactly is the value to them of the smaller one? Let's see, Mr. I checked my desk. Erickson, any thoughts on what it could be? He looked up and stared at me blankly. At least he was awake, I mused. Still, he shook his head. Okay, class, I get it. It's Monday morning. You've all got places you'd rather be, off partying or playing games or what have you. But since you are here, let's try to contribute. One idea prominent in Eastern Europe is that the fairies use these teeth to build various items. Necklaces, earrings, and other items of jewelry are a common belief. The more grandiose idea is that they construct fantastical castles to live in. Again, your first thought might be, if that's the case, why haven't we found any? Kudos, you're asking the exact same question I am. I walked to the collapsible table I had set up the day before, a special visual aid for the lesson. I pulled away the sheet and revealed a small-scale model castle that looked to be made of very tiny teeth. I chuckled. Don't worry, class. This is merely a prop for demonstration I had made a couple of years back. But as you can see, even if this was as big as they made them, they'd be found somewhere, given the sheer prevalence of the tooth fairy myth globally, don't you think? Now, there's all manner of hocus-pocus books out there about contacting the fairy realm and how to meet these creatures. All of that is, of course, fiction. Completely nonsense. They're still not really taking it in. All right, Mr. Erickson, since your head is clearly somewhere else, let's bring you back into the room. I walked over to his chair, and he perked up. He began thrashing around. Oh, come on now, there's no need for that. More people than you could count have tried to get out of those restraints. Let me tell you now, none of them have ever managed it. If you're really not going to pay any attention, then you're quite simply forcing me to get to the next part of the lesson plan. I looked intently at Mr. Erickson. Now, it is common to have an injection of lidocaine for these sorts of procedures. However, since I was dismissed and thoroughly discredited, I've had to make do without it. Please do try to keep your head still. I know we've got the restraint there belted across your forehead, but if you move too much, it will be worse. You're all set there with the mouth opener too. So let's begin the procedure. He tried to say something, but with the mouth opener propping open his lips and cheeks, it was unintelligible. No matter, I had to push on with the work. Now, what I'm going to do here, Mr. Erickson, is use a tool we call an elevator to gently rock the tooth back and forth to help loosen it. As I began, he starts to scream in pain. This is nothing unusual. I need to push through. I drop the elevator to the metal tray by his chair and pick up the forceps. All right, we've now loosened the tooth enough that we can do the hard part. I continued to describe what I was doing, despite his constant interruptions. Right, so the forceps are now over the tooth, and now we'll just gently rock the tooth. You may feel some grinding as it pushes against the others. That's quite common. And crack. He screamed, and a smudging of blood dribbled from his clenched teeth. I yanked the forceps with the extracted tooth out. As I raised it to the air, the rest of the class screamed and mumbled incoherently. There we go. What a beauty. That's one. And you have, let's see, 2, 4... Oh, not quite a full set to begin with. Looks like someone should have been brushing more then. Let's not waste any time then. I'll just wipe up that blood there. A little bit of gauze shouldn't mop it up. I dropped the tooth into a small metal dish, ready to move on to the next. I continued my work. Elevator, push, prod, loosen, forceps. Clamp down, push, prod, wiggle, and crack. I had become very good at avoiding the unfortunate shattering of a tooth on removal. It just adds unnecessary delay. You know, class, in Italy, they have 3 different key figures when it comes to... I grunted as I pulled another canine out. The tooth fairy. They actually have both the mouse, Topolino, and La Fontina del Denti, or literally tooth fairy. And then they have... Crack. I grunted again. A third. You see, back when persecution of Christians were rife, there was a woman, Apollonia. Now she was captured and tortured in simply awful ways. Crack. They ruptured her and abused her specifically by forcibly pulling or shattering all of her teeth. Quite a thing to lose, back before... Crack. The wonders of modern dentistry, as I'm sure you can imagine. I wiped away the blood from my patient's face and went back at it. As a result, in a particular region of Italy, They share the story of Saint Apollonia as the patron saint of dentistry. It is her instead of a fairy or mouse who comes to collect children's teeth. They say she rides on a chariot made from teeth, pulled by mice. I had collected all of Mr. Erickson's teeth in a small dish now. That's why I believe I have found the answer. You see, Apollonia is the only human figure in the tooth myth to exchange teeth. That's why I've been working on this. I unveiled the huge object behind my desk. This was my magnum opus. It had taken me nearly 7 years, but it was nearly complete. My chariot of teeth. I had painstakingly constructed it from thousands upon thousands of discarded teeth. Once it's complete, which won't be long now, I'll be able to finally enter the fairy realm and study them like no one else has before. I began assembling the newly extracted teeth into place on the side of my chariot. I laughed as I turned back to Mr. Erickson. He might have passed out. It didn't matter. You know, I've probably spent more on superglue on this thing than any other part of it. Once I was done placing his teeth, I turned back to the class. I walked back to my patient. I never did thank you, by the way. It was very convenient for me that you brought your whole family here. Especially since that, Rachel, is it? Especially since that Rachel still has so many baby teeth. They come out a lot easier. I began walking over to Mr. Erickson's family, all well tied to their chairs still, like good students. Mr. Erickson, have you ever seen a child's skull? Did you know that they're all born with their adult teeth too, ready to grow out in the years to come? You see, that's why children make for the best addition to my chariot. They have double the number of teeth as you or I. They're nestled up high into their skull, of course. I turned back to him and showed him my hammer and chisel. But not to fret, I'll get them out. I'm quite practiced at this by now. Makes me fear the Tooth Fairy, that story. If you liked it, remember to give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment as well. And if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button and click on that bell icon so you can get updates whenever I upload a new story. That's it for this episode. But remember, come back soon.